My son was in agony and needed my kidney. My daughter-in-law told me, "It's your duty, you're his mother." The doctor was already getting ready to operate on me, when suddenly my 9-year-old grandson came running into the room and yelled, "Grandma!" I'll tell the truth about why my dad really needs your kidney. The entire medical team froze. I'm glad you're here. If you're watching this video, hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and tell me in the comments where you're listening to my story of revenge from. I want to know how far it has traveled. I'm lying on the cold steel of the operating table. The white light of the surgical lamp is blinding my eyes. It's so bright, I want to squeeze them shut with all my might. But I can't. My whole body is stiff. And it's not from the cold. It's from a suffocating feeling, as if fate itself is squeezing my neck. The steady beep, beep of the heart monitor is a constant rhythm, but each beat is like a hammer striking my head. I can hear every sound in the room with crystal clarity. The metallic clinking of instruments as the nurse arranges them, the rustle of paper as Dr. Evans reviews my file, and even the faint whispers from the other side of the glass, where my daughter-in-law, Rebecca, is with her parents. I try to lift my gaze toward the opaque glass. There's Rebecca, her arms crossed over her chest, with a gaze as sharp as a razor blade. She's whispering something to her parents, but her eyes never leave me. It's as if she's giving me an order. Sign it now. Do it. Don't hesitate. I've already signed the consent form to donate my kidney to my son Adam. That paper must be somewhere on the doctor's desk now, my shaky signature and unchangeable commitment. The nurse holds the syringe, and the anesthesia gleams under the light. I close my eyes. I try to take a deep breath, but my chest feels as heavy as lead. I think of Adam, my oldest son, whom I raised and sacrificed my whole life to protect. He's in the room next door, weak, waiting for my kidney to survive. I tell myself this is the right thing to do. As a mother, I have to do it. But why do I feel this emptiness in my soul, this nameless anxiety? Suddenly, a thunderous noise startles me. The operating room door bursts open, and a gust of cold air rushes in, making the instrument tray on the table shake and clink. The entire room seems to hold its breath. I open my eyes, trying to lift my head, even though the straps are holding me tight. My 9-year-old grandson, Mario, rushes in like a small whirlwind. His sneakers are covered in mud, his school uniform is wrinkled, and his little chest is heaving as he gasps for air. Behind him, a terrified nurse is chasing him, shouting, "Child, you can't come in here! My God, stop!" But Mario doesn't stop. He runs straight toward me, his big round eyes filled with fear, but also with determination. "Grandma," he says in a trembling voice, so clear it squeezes my heart. "I have to tell everyone why my dad really needs your kidney." The whole room falls silent. The beep-beep of the heart monitor now sounds louder, as if it wants to tear the space apart. A doctor nearby drops a pair of surgical forceps. The sound of metal hitting the marble floor is deafening, a sharp break in the tension. I look at Mario, my little grandson, whom I still carry in my arms and read stories to every night. There he is, gripping an old cell phone, his face pale but his eyes bright. What does he know? Why is he saying this? My heart is racing, as if it wants to jump out of my chest. I want to scream to ask him right there, but my throat is so dry I can't utter a word. Dr. Evans, the head surgeon, frowns. He raises a hand, signaling for the entire team to stop. His voice is deep but sharp. "Whatever you have to say it now." I see his gaze pass over me and land on Mario, as if he too is caught in this strange moment on the other side of the glass. Rebecca bangs on the door, making the glass shudder. "Don't listen to him!" she shouts in a shrill, almost hysterical voice. "He's just a kid, you'll see." But Rebecca's look is no longer cold. It's trembling with panic, as if a secret is about to be revealed. Mario doesn't look at his mom. He only looks at me. Gripping the cell phone in his small hand so tightly, his knuckles turn white. He takes a deep breath, as if gathering all the courage in his life. I want to sit up, to hug him, to tell him not to be afraid. But I can't move. I can only look. And in my little grandson's eyes, I see a pain, a truth he's trying to bring to light. In that instant, as the whole room holds its breath, memories of the past flood my mind like an avalanche, of those days when I thought my family was a closed circle, full of love and trust. I remember my old house in Chicago, where every corner smelled of disinfectant, a scent I'd become so used to, I didn't even notice it. I'm 67 years old, but sometimes I feel much older, as if time stole my vitality a long time ago. My husband, Joe, has been bedridden for more than 10 years. He sits in his old wheelchair, its wheels squeaking every time I push him into the backyard for some air. He hardly ever talks. Only every now and then does he let out a sigh, his gaze lost in nothingness. Once, I took his hand and asked him, "Joe, are you tired of this life?" He just blinked without responding. I don't know if he understood me or if I was just talking to myself. That house was my whole world, the place where I raised my 2 sons, Adam and Brandon. I did everything to get them ahead. I woke up at dawn to go to the market to sell produce. In the afternoons, I'd sit and sew clothes for the neighbors, and sometimes I'd stay up until midnight to mend torn shirts and deliver them on time. My hands became rough and calloused, my nails always with dirt from digging around in the market, but I never complained. I just wanted Adam and Brandon to have a better life, not to suffer like I did. Adam, my oldest son, was my pride. He was strong, tall, he worked in construction and always came home with a loud laugh. But in recent years, he started to get weak. At first, it was just tiredness. Then, little by little, I saw him pale with sunken eyes. And once, I felt a horrible terror when he told me he was urinating blood. I hugged him and asked, "Adam, what's wrong, son? Tell me." He just shook his head and smiled weakly. "Don't worry, Mom. It's probably just from all the hard work." Rebecca, my daughter-in-law, came into our lives like a strange wind. She was beautiful. She spoke sweetly. And at first, I truly believed she was a blessing for Adam. She took care of him diligently. She brought medicine home, watched his meals, and reminded him to take his pills at the exact time. All the neighbors praised me. "You're so lucky, Mrs. Jones, to have such a good daughter-in-law." And I believed it too. Every time I saw Rebecca give a bowl of soup to Adam, I'd tell myself I was just worrying too much. But sometimes I'd catch her cold, calculating gaze, as if she were hiding something. Once I saw her in the backyard, whispering on the phone late at night, in a low but hurried voice. "Don't worry, everything is going according to the plan." I asked her, "Rebecca, who are you calling so late?" She was startled and laughed nervously. "Just a friend, Mom. Go back to sleep." Brandon, my younger son, was different. He's 26 years old. He lives a few blocks from my house and works as a plumber and electrician. Brandon doesn't talk much, but every time he came to visit, he'd always bring something to eat, sometimes some oranges, other times some bread that was still warm. He'd sit next to me, fixing the ceiling fan that squeaked or changing a light bulb in the kitchen. Once he looked at me and said in his deep voice, "Mom, don't work yourself to death like this. I don't want to see you exhausted." I just smiled and waved my hand. "I can still handle it, Brandon. You worry about your brother. He needs you more." But Brandon just shook his head, his gaze full of concern. Mario, my little grandson, was my only joy in those heavy days. He's 9 years old and often came to my house with his little backpack on his back. Mario liked to sit in the backyard and play with some plastic cars I bought him at a flea market. He'd tell me stories, innocent tales that sometimes left me frozen. Once he looked at me with his round eyes and said, "Grandma, my mom talks on the phone at night. I heard her say something about some medicine, but I didn't understand." I smiled and ruffled his hair. "I'm sure she was just asking the doctor something for your dad. Don't think so much about it, my boy." But inside, a seed of unease was beginning to sprout. And then, one afternoon, everything changed. I was in the kitchen, preparing dinner. The smell of toasted rice was floating in the air when Rebecca came in. She didn't say hello. She didn't smile. She just stood there with her arms crossed. Her voice was sharp, like a knife slicing the air. Mom, the doctor says only your kidney is compatible. It's your responsibility. You have to save him. I froze. The spoon in my hand dropped into the pan with a dull clang. I looked at her, trying to find a bit of warmth in her eyes, but I only saw a cold determination, almost a demand. "Rebecca, I know, I'll do everything for Adam," I whispered, but my throat felt dry. She nodded as if she had achieved her goal and turned around. Not even 10 minutes passed when Rebecca's parents showed up. They walked into my house as if it were their own. They sat down at the dining room table and said in unison, "That's right. A mother's duty is something you can't run from. This whole family now depends on you." I stood there, still with the spoon in my hand, feeling cornered. Adam, who at that moment was propped up in a chair, so skinny I almost didn't recognize him, took my hand. His hand was freezing. "Mom," he whispered, "I trust you'll save me." I looked into his eyes, those eyes that, as a child, shone with so much life and now only reflected exhaustion and pleading. I nodded without being able to say anything, suddenly feeling like the small room had become suffocating. The smell of medicinal herbs from Joe's pot in the corner made me feel like I couldn't breathe. That night, I took Joe his bowl of soup, just like every day. The squeaking of his wheelchair on the concrete floor was a constant reminder that I was carrying this whole family on my shoulders. I put the bowl in front of him. I looked at him, but he just sighed without saying anything. I wanted to tell him, to ask him if I was doing the right thing, but he was just there, as motionless as a shadow. I went out to the backyard, where Mario was playing with his car. He looked up with his bright eyes, but they were full of doubt. "Grandma," he said, "what if someone gets sick because another person is giving them medicine?" I stopped dead in my tracks. My heart skipped a beat. "Why do you ask that, my boy?" I said, trying to stay calm. But Mario just lowered his head and kept pushing his car without answering. What I didn't know was that at that moment I was on the edge of an abyss, and only a few more steps would make me fall. The days that followed that afternoon when Rebecca came to my house and left me no choice, my life felt crushed by an invisible pressure, heavier than the suffocating summer heat of Chicago. I kept getting up early, going to the market to sell my vegetables and oranges, sitting under the dim light to sew clothes. But my soul was no longer at peace. Every step I took, every stitch I made, carried with it a question. Am I doing the right thing? Do I really have to sacrifice myself like this? But then Adam's pleading gaze, Rebecca's sharp words, and her parents' questioning looks clung to me without giving me a single moment to breathe. The next morning, when the sun was just peeking out, Rebecca was already at my door. I had just finished preparing tea. The scent of spearmint was just beginning to fill the house when she walked in, without knocking, without saying hello. "Mom," she said in a voice as firm as a nail, "the doctor says there isn't much time left. If you keep hesitating, he could be in danger." She put a stack of medical papers on the dining room table, white pages filled with numbers and signatures I didn't quite understand. She pointed to each line as if she were teaching a child. "It says clearly here that you are the only compatible one. No one else can save him." I stood there holding the teapot. The hot water was burning my fingers, but I didn't feel the pain. I only heard the sound of the broom scraping the concrete as I started to sweep the house, a way to escape Rebecca's gaze. "I heard you," I said in a barely audible voice. "I'll do everything for Adam." But inside, a heavy rock was weighing me down, making me want to scream, to run away. I kept sweeping. The sound of the broom was like a sad rhythm, trying to drown out Rebecca's words. But she didn't stop. She just stood there, watching me as if she expected me to agree once more to confirm I wouldn't dare refuse. When she left, I sat in a chair and covered my face with my hands. I thought of Adam, of the days when he was little and would run after me at the market, clinging to my skirt and laughing out loud. "Mom, when I grow up, I'm going to build you a beautiful house." Now he lay there, skinny, pale, a shadow of what he once was. I wondered if I could let him go without doing anything, but every time I thought about donating my kidney, I was filled with fear. A fear not of the surgery, but of the feeling that I was being pushed towards something bigger, darker, that I couldn't see clearly. That night, Rebecca's parents came over. They brought a basket of fruit, some mangoes and some oranges, but they just left it on the table as a mere formality and sat in the two main chairs in the living room as if they owned the house. Her father, Mr. Collins, coughed a couple of times and said in a raspy voice, "In my day, parents would sacrifice everything for their children. My grandmother sold all her land to save her son. Now it's your turn. You have to do the same." Rebecca's mother, Mrs. Peterson, nodded, with a gaze as sharp as a knife. "If you refuse, this family's honor will be in the dirt. What will the neighbors say? They'll say you don't love your son, that you don't deserve to be a mother." I was sitting there, clutching the edge of the table, feeling cornered in a dark corner. I wanted to say something, to ask them why all the burden was on me, but I couldn't open my mouth. I just lowered my head and nodded slightly like an automaton. Dinner that night was as heavy as a funeral. Rebecca, with a fake charm, put a piece of chicken on my plate, but her voice was cold. "Mom, save your strength for the surgery." I looked at the chicken on my plate, but I couldn't swallow. Adam was sitting in front of me, his face gaunt and his eyes sunken. He tried to smile weakly. "Mom, I know you'll save me, just like all the times you saved me when I was a kid." His words were like a stab to my heart. I remembered the days when he had a high fever and I'd stay up all night wiping him down with wet cloths, or the times he fell off his bike and I'd run to bandage his wounds. I was always there. I was always the mother willing to do anything. But this time, why did I feel so afraid? Brandon was sitting in a corner of the table, silent as a shadow. He didn't eat. He just stirred the spoon in his bowl of soup, never taking his eyes off Rebecca. I saw his look filled with suspicion, as if he was trying to see through my daughter-in-law's mask. I wanted to ask him, but I didn't dare. The air in the room was thick. The only sound was the clinking of spoons against plates, like hammers on my conscience. After dinner, Rebecca got up and personally took Adam's plate to the kitchen to wash it, not letting anyone else touch it. She did it quickly, but I noticed her checking the plate very carefully, as if she was afraid someone would see something inside. That night I couldn't sleep. Lying in my old bed, I listened to the tick-tock of the clock on the wall. Every second, a reminder that Adam's time was running out. I got up and walked down the hall to get a glass of water. Then I heard whispers from Adam and Rebecca's room. I stopped, standing in the dark, holding my breath. Rebecca's voice was low but clear. "Yes. After the transplant, we'll have all the data. Don't worry, she won't dare refuse." I stood there, my heart pounding. My hands were trembling so much I had to lean on the wall so I wouldn't fall. Data? What were they talking about? I wanted to knock on the door, confront her, but right at that moment Rebecca opened it. She was startled to see me, and then smiled falsely. "Still up, Mom? I was just calling to ask about his medicine." I nodded and turned away, but I felt as if thorns had been plunged into my heart. Rebecca's smile, her voice, everything was false, like a mask hiding something terrible. In the days that followed the tense conversation with Rebecca and her parents, I felt like I was living in a foggy dream where everything familiar was becoming strange and terrifying. I continued with my daily tasks, going to the market to sell, sewing clothes, feeding my husband Joe, but every action was mechanical, soulless. My heart was heavy, as if a black cloud hung over my head, and Rebecca's words, Adam's pleading gaze, they spun in my mind without giving me a second of peace. But then, one afternoon, when Mario, my 9-year-old grandson, came over, the first crack appeared in the wall of trust I was trying to keep standing. Mario came in with his sneakers stained with mud and his little hands still sticky from art class paint. He left his old backpack in a corner, sat on the floor, and took out the plastic car I had bought him at the flea market last year. I looked at him trying to smile, but my mind was in a jumble. Mario had always been a little light in my dark days with his innocent stories and his crystalline laugh, but that day he didn't smile. He pushed the car back and forth on the floor with a lost look, and suddenly he lifted his head and stared at me. "Grandma," he said in a low but clear voice, "what if my dad isn't sick because of life, but because someone is giving him medicine on purpose?" I was startled as if I had been slapped. The spoon in my hand almost fell, but I managed to hold on to it, trembling. "Why do you say that, Mario?" I asked, trying to keep my voice calm, but my heart was pounding. I looked into his eyes, so clear but full of a worry that seemed too big for his age. Mario didn't answer right away. He lowered his head and kept playing with his car, but I saw him clench his hand as if he were holding something back. I wanted to hug him, to ask him more, but I only managed a nervous laugh. "You're thinking too much, my boy. Your dad is sick and the doctors are curing him." But my smile was forced, and Mario didn't return it. He just looked at me. He got up silently, took his backpack, and ran back to his house. Mario's question was like a stone thrown into a calm lake in my heart, creating ripples of doubt. I stayed there, in my small kitchen, looking at the vegetables on the table but unable to concentrate. I thought of Adam, of the bottles of pills Rebecca always brought, of how she controlled everything related to my son. I told myself I was probably imagining things. Rebecca was Adam's wife. She loved him. She wouldn't hurt him. But deep in my heart, I knew something wasn't right. That afternoon, Brandon came with his toolbox, saying he was going to fix the kitchen light that had been flickering the night before. I watched him climb the ladder, twist and tighten things, and the light from the new bulb lit up the whole kitchen. But then, as he came down with the old light bulb in his hand, Brandon looked at me with an unusual seriousness. "Mom," he said in a low voice, almost a whisper, "my sister-in-law is acting very strange. I saw some unlabeled pill bottles in my brother's medicine cabinet, and she hides them very well." I was startled, and the plate I was washing in the sink fell, splashing water on my blouse. "What are you saying?" I asked, my voice choked. Brandon got off the ladder and stood in front of me, his eyes filled with concern. "Mom, I'm afraid what's wrong with my brother isn't a normal illness. I'm afraid someone—" He didn't finish the sentence, but his look said it all. I stood there, my hands wet, feeling as if the floor was sinking beneath my feet. I wanted to scream, to tell Brandon he was overthinking things, that Rebecca couldn't do something so terrible. But I couldn't speak. I just kept looking at Brandon, and in my head, Mario's question echoed again. What if my dad is sick because someone is giving him medicine? I tried to discard that idea, but it clung to me like a shadow I couldn't escape. The next afternoon, I took soup to Adam at the hospital. The white room and the pungent smell of disinfectant made me feel like I couldn't breathe. Adam was lying down, skinny, with IVs in both arms, but he still tried to smile when he saw me. "Mom, you're here already," he said in a weak voice. I put the bowl on the nightstand, and when I was about to give him the first spoonful, I saw Rebecca next to the bed holding a glass of water. She discreetly dropped a strange-colored pill into the glass. A movement so fast that if I hadn't been watching carefully, I wouldn't have noticed. When I came in, she was startled and spilled a little water on the floor. "What pill is that, Rebecca?" I asked, trying to sound calm. She smiled, but her smile was forced. "It's a supplement for his kidney. The doctor prescribed it." I nodded, but a chill ran down my spine. I couldn't stay calm. After Adam finished eating, I looked for the on-call doctor, a middle-aged man with thick glasses. "Doctor," I asked in a trembling voice, "did you prescribe any new kidney supplements for Adam?" He was surprised and checked the file. "No, we haven't prescribed anything new. The current medication is sufficient." His answer left me frozen. I stood in the hospital hallway listening to the announcements over the loudspeaker, but my mind was blank. Rebecca had lied. What was that pill? Why did she have to hide it? At sunset, Mario came to my house again. This time he didn't play with his car. He sat in a chair and took an old cell phone with a broken screen from his backpack. "Grandma," he said in a low but firm voice, "I want you to listen to this." He typed something and handed me the phone. A recording played. It was Rebecca's voice, whispering but clear. "After the transplant, the test results will be perfect. Don't worry. She won't dare refuse." I dropped the phone. My hands were shaking uncontrollably. I looked at Mario, my little grandson, and saw that his eyes were red, as if he was just as scared as I was. "I found it on my mom's old phone," he said in a choked voice. "I don't know what it is, but I thought you should know." I hugged Mario, trying to hold back the tears. "You're so brave, my boy," I whispered. But inside, everything was falling apart. Test results. What was Rebecca talking about? I thought of Adam, of the unlabeled bottles, of Brandon's suspicious look, of the strange-colored pill in the glass of water. They were loose pieces of a puzzle, but little by little they were fitting together, forming a picture I didn't dare look at directly. That night, I didn't sleep. I sat in my silent house, listening to the tick-tock of the clock. Every second, a reminder that Adam's time was running out. One morning I went to the hospital carrying an old plastic container with hot food. The smell of rice and stewed meat escaped from the edges. Adam's room was white, cold, and the smell of disinfectant was so strong I had a hard time breathing. I had gotten used to that environment, but that day I felt it pressing on my chest. Adam was lying there with sunken eyes and a pale face, but he still tried to smile when he saw me. "Mom, you're here so early," he said in a voice as weak as a sigh. I put the food on the nightstand and tried to smile, but a storm was raging inside me. The doubts of the previous days, Mario's question, Brandon's warning, all screamed in my head without giving me peace. Rebecca was already there, sitting next to Adam's bed, staring at the IV bag that dripped slowly. She didn't look at me. She didn't say hello. She just nodded silently, as if my presence was a given. On the nightstand, I noticed a small pill bottle with the cap ajar, half hidden under a crumpled paper napkin. The bottle had no label. It was just a white plastic container with some strange blue pills inside. I picked it up, trying to keep my voice firm. "What medicine is this, Rebecca?" She was startled. She almost jumped and snatched the bottle from my hands so fast that it made me step back. "They're just vitamins, Mom," she said with a smile as fake as cheap paint. "The doctor prescribed them to help his kidney." I nodded, but a chill ran down my spine. Rebecca's smile, the way she snatched the bottle from me. Everything was wrong, as if she were hiding a secret I wasn't supposed to know. I sat next to Adam and started to feed him, but my mind was somewhere else. I thought about the unlabeled bottle, about what Brandon had said about the strange medicines Rebecca was hiding. I thought about Mario, about his innocent but sharp question. What if my dad is sick because someone is giving him medicine? I wanted to ask Rebecca right there. I wanted to scream and demand the truth, but I was afraid that if I opened my mouth, everything would fall apart and I'd lose Adam forever. I looked at my son as he struggled to swallow each bite and told myself, "Mary, you have to calm down. You have to find out what's going on first." At noon, Brandon came to the hospital. He walked in with his hands still stained with grease from work and his old shirt worn out at the shoulders. He didn't say anything. He just sat silently in a corner, watching Rebecca, who was in the hallway talking to a nurse. When she left, Brandon came up to me and took a small plastic bag from his backpack. "Mom, I want you to see this," he whispered in a voice as tense as a guitar string. He showed me his phone. On the screen were some blurry photos, but clear enough to stop my heart. It was Rebecca in the hospital parking lot, discreetly taking a small bag from the trunk of her car and handing it to an unknown man. The man was wearing a black jacket and a cap that covered most of his face, but I could clearly see the bag of medicine in Rebecca's hand. "I took these photos yesterday," Brandon said in a trembling voice. "I followed her because I thought her behavior was very strange. Mom, I'm afraid she's doing something to my brother Adam." I was speechless, gripping the phone so tightly my knuckles turned white. The cold floor of the hospital seemed to absorb all the warmth from my body. "Brandon," I whispered, "are you sure? Did you hear what they were saying?" Brandon shook his head, his eyes red. I couldn't hear well, but I saw her give the bag to the man, and he handed her an envelope. "Mom, this isn't normal." I looked into Brandon's eyes. I saw the concern and the rage in them, and I knew he wasn't lying, but I still didn't want to believe it. Rebecca was Adam's wife. She had sworn to take care of him. How could she do something so terrible? That afternoon, when I returned home, Mario came again. He didn't run or play as usual. Instead, he sat silently in a chair, hugging his backpack. "Grandma," he said in a low but determined voice, "I want you to hear something." He took the old cell phone with the broken screen from his backpack and, trembling, played an audio file. Rebecca's voice echoed, whispered, but clear as a knife plunging into my heart. "After the transplant, the data will be complete. Don't worry, that old woman won't dare refuse. This result is worth 100 times more." I became rigid. I dropped the phone on the table, my hands shaking uncontrollably. I looked at Mario, my little grandson, and saw his eyes were red, his lips pressed together as if he was holding back tears. "I found it on my mom's old phone," he said in a choked voice. "I don't know what it is, but I thought you should know." I hugged Mario, feeling as if the whole world was collapsing at my feet. "You're so brave, Mario," I whispered, but my voice broke and tears rolled down my cheeks. I thought of Adam, of the unlabeled bottles, of Brandon's photos, of Mario's recording. They were loose pieces, but they were fitting together, painting a dark picture I didn't dare confront. What was Rebecca doing? What data? What results? And why did she say, "That old woman won't dare refuse"? I felt betrayed, not just by Rebecca, but by my own faith in family, in love. That night I didn't sleep. I sat in my silent house, listening to the sirens of an ambulance in the street, the red and blue lights flashing through the window like cuts in my soul. I thought of Adam, of how he was getting weaker every day, of the strange medicines, of Rebecca's calculating whispers. I thought of Brandon, of the suspicion and worry in his eyes, and of Mario, the 9-year-old who had bravely brought me the truth. I held my head, feeling like my brain was going to explode. I wanted to run to the hospital, confront Rebecca, scream and demand an explanation, but I was afraid that the truth was even more horrible than I imagined, afraid I wouldn't have the strength to bear it. I got up, went out to the backyard, and looked at the pale moonlight. I thought of Joe, my silent husband, who could only sit and watch everything. I wanted to tell him, to ask him what I should do, but I knew he wouldn't answer me. I was alone with the pieces of a truth that were slowly revealing themselves. The next morning, I woke up with the feeling that the whole world was weighing on my chest. The birds chirping in the backyard, a sound that normally brought me calm, now felt like knives stabbing my mind. I knew today was the day the hospital would make the final decision about Adam's kidney transplant. The clues Mario and Brandon had given me, the recording, the photos, the unlabeled bottle, they kept spinning in my head, but I didn't dare face them. I was afraid that if I dug deeper, I would find a truth I couldn't bear. I just wanted to save Adam, to see my son healthy again, even if the price was a part of my body. But deep down, I knew things weren't that simple. The hospital scheduled me for noon. I entered a small meeting room where Dr. Evans was already waiting for me. He spread the lab results on the table, white sheets filled with numbers and graphs I didn't understand. "Mrs. Jones," he said in a grave but firm voice, "we have reviewed everything thoroughly. You are the most compatible person to donate your kidney to Adam. If we don't proceed soon, his life will be in danger." I sat there clutching the edge of my blouse, my head buzzing as if I had a swarm of bees inside. "I understand," I whispered, but my voice was so low I doubted if he had heard me. Dr. Evans looked at me, and his expression softened. "Do you need more time to think about it?" he asked. I shook my head, not because I had already decided, but because I felt I had no other way out. Rebecca, her parents, and even Adam, they were all counting on me, and I couldn't let my son die. Through the glass of the door, I saw Rebecca standing there with her arms crossed. Her gaze, as sharp as ever, gave a nod to her mother, Mrs. Peterson, as if she were sure I wouldn't dare refuse. That gesture gave me a chill, as if they were playing a game of chess and I was just a pawn. I wanted to get up, to yell that I knew about the bottle, about the recording, but I couldn't. I just sat there, feeling trapped in an invisible cage with no escape. That evening, I gathered the whole family in my small house. The living room was crowded, the yellowish light of an old bulb reflected on the worn-out walls. I put a teapot on the table. The scent of spearmint couldn't disperse the heavy atmosphere. Rebecca's parents, Mr. Collins and Mrs. Peterson, sat in the center, occupying the two best chairs as if they were the owners. Rebecca sat next to them, her hands clasped, giving me a sidelong glance as if to make sure I wouldn't back out. Adam was lying on a sofa, his face pale and his breathing weak. Brandon was leaning against the wall, silent, but his eyes were red, as if he was holding back a fury about to explode. Mario was huddled in a corner, hugging his small backpack, his eyes filled with distress. I took a deep breath. My hands trembled as I set the teapot down. "I've made a decision," I said in a trembling voice, but trying to sound firm. "I'm going to donate my kidney to Adam." The room exploded like a bomb. Mrs. Peterson clapped and said in a shrill voice, "That's a real mother. I knew you wouldn't disappoint this family." Rebecca covered her face. Tears were streaming, but I saw how she clenched her fists as if she were acting in a play. "Oh, Mom," she said in a choked voice, "I knew you love him more than anyone. Thank you." Adam looked at me with eyes clouded by exhaustion, but he still managed to say, "Mom, I owe you my life." His words broke my heart like a dagger to the chest, but then Brandon jumped up and hit the table hard. The bang made the teacups vibrate. "No!" he yelled, his voice trembling with rage. "Mom, don't you see? You're sacrificing yourself for a wicked plan. She's using you, and she's using my brother Adam." The air in the room became thick. The only sound was the buzzing of a mosquito around the light bulb. Rebecca leaped to her feet and pointed at Brandon. "What are you saying? How dare you accuse me? I do everything for my husband." But Brandon didn't back down. He came closer, his gaze on fire. "Accuse you? And what about those unlabeled bottles and those midnight calls? Mom, you can't let them deceive you." I looked at Brandon, then at Rebecca, and finally at Adam. I wanted to say something, to ask Brandon to calm down, but I couldn't. I just looked away, feeling as if the whole world was coming down on me. That night I sat alone in my small room in front of the old wooden table. The oil lamp flickered. Its dim light illuminated the trembling words I was writing in my will. I wrote that the little house would go to Brandon and some of my few valuables to Mario. Every stroke was like a cut in my soul. I didn't know if I'd survive the operation, but I wanted to be prepared, to leave something for those I loved. Joe was sitting motionless in his wheelchair in a corner, watching me with his lifeless eyes. I saw his hand tremble, as if he wanted to say something but couldn't. I looked at him, and tears rolled down my cheeks. "Joe, I have to do it, right? I have to save Adam." He didn't answer. He just blinked, and 2 tears fell down his gaunt cheeks. I folded the will and put it at the bottom of an old wooden box where I kept memories of my wedding. Outside, the rain poured, mixing with the sound of my own sobs. Early in the morning, when the sky was still dark and the fog clung to the little streets leading to the hospital, I was lying on a gurney in an ambulance. I was clutching a small fabric bag with a change of clothes and an embroidered handkerchief I'd had since my wedding day. The ambulance siren howled, but I no longer paid attention. The streetlights filtered through the window, blurred like my broken dreams. I closed my eyes and tried to breathe, but my chest felt heavy. Today was the day I would donate my kidney to Adam, my son. I had already decided. I had written my will. I had prepared myself mentally, but my heart was still in knots, as if I were entering a nightmare I couldn't wake up from. When the ambulance stopped, a nurse pushed the gurney down an endless hospital hallway. The screeching of the wheels on the tiled floor was like a hammer hitting my head. Rebecca was walking right behind me. Her steps were light but firm, like those of a guard. "Don't worry, Mom," she said in a low but sharp voice. "After the surgery, everything will be fine." I looked at her out of the corner of my eye and saw a flash of triumph in her eyes, as if she had already secured her victory. Her smile gave me a chill, not from cold, but from the feeling that I was being led into a plan where I was just a pawn without a will. At the reception, Rebecca's parents, Mr. Collins and Mrs. Peterson, were already there. They were dressed up. Mr. Collins in an old but well-ironed suit, and Mrs. Peterson in a bright red dress, as if they were coming to a big event and not to a surgery. They took Rebecca by the arm and greeted the doctors with an exaggerated friendliness, as if they had known each other all their lives. I heard Mrs. Peterson laugh loudly as she said to a young doctor, "Thank you for all your support, doctor. We won't forget this favor." I stood there, clutching my fabric bag, feeling like a stranger in my own story. Adam had already been taken to a waiting room. They allowed me to see him before I went into the operating room. The small room was cold, and his skinny arms were full of IVs. His face was pale, his eyes sunken, but when he saw me, he tried to smile weakly. "Mom, thank you," he whispered, his voice broken by exhaustion. I took his hand. It was freezing, and I felt like crying. "Adam, I'll do everything to make you get better," I told him, but my voice trembled, as if I were trying to convince myself. I looked into my son's eyes. I saw an absolute trust in them and wondered, am I doing the right thing, or am I risking my life for something I don't fully understand? Suddenly, Brandon came running in with his hands still stained with grease from work. He was gasping. His shirt was soaked with sweat, as if he had run a long distance. "Mom, don't do it," he said, almost pleading as he grabbed me by the shoulders. "I beg you, don't donate the kidney. Something isn't right." I looked at Brandon. I saw his red eyes filled with rage and concern. I wanted to tell him that I had already decided, that I couldn't let Adam die. But the words wouldn't come out. I just put my hand on his, squeezed it gently, and let the nurse take me away. Brandon was left there, powerless, shouting behind me, "Mom, listen to me!" But I didn't turn around. I didn't dare turn around because I was afraid that if I looked into Brandon's eyes, I would fall apart. The hospital hallway was long and cold. The smell of disinfectant was so strong it made me nauseous. An impersonal voice sounded over the loudspeakers. "Operating room number 3, prepare for kidney transplant." They took me to a changing room where a nurse put a cap and a mask on me. The cold blue gown they put on me was a reminder that I was about to lose a part of my body. I looked at myself in the mirror. I saw my gaunt face, my eyes surrounded by dark circles. I asked myself, "Mary, what are you doing? Are you sure this is the right thing to do?" But then the image of Adam in the hospital bed appeared in my mind, and I gritted my teeth and went on. As I walked down the hallway, I saw Rebecca and Mrs. Peterson standing by a glass window, talking to an unknown man. He was wearing a black jacket and a cap that covered his face, identical to the man in the photo Brandon had shown me. I saw Rebecca hand him an envelope, and he quickly put it in his jacket pocket. My heart started to beat hard. A cold sweat ran down the back of my neck. What were they doing? What was in that envelope? I wanted to stop, to scream and demand an answer, but the nurse took my arm and led me into the operating room. Inside the operating room, the white light shone directly into my eyes, so bright I had to squint. Dr. Evans was there, his face serious but calm. "Everything is ready, Mrs. Jones," he said in a grave voice. "Just relax." I nodded, but my body was stiff. The nurse placed electrodes on my chest, and the heart monitor's beep-beep was constant, but each beat was like a warning. Rebecca appeared on the other side of the glass. She pressed her face against the window and made a sign to sign quickly toward the papers another nurse was holding. I took the pen, trembling. The ink ran on the paper. When I signed, I felt as if I were signing my own death sentence. I looked at my blurred signature. I thought of the will I had written the night before, of Brandon, of Mario, and I wondered, will this be the last time I'm conscious? Just as the doctor was getting ready to inject the anesthesia, my heart was beating furiously. A cold sweat was soaking my back. I closed my eyes. I tried to breathe, but images of Adam, Brandon, Mario, and Rebecca were spinning in my head. I thought of Mario's recording, of the unlabeled bottle, of Brandon's photo. I wanted to stop it all, but I couldn't. I had come too far. I had signed. I had entered this room. I could only lie there, waiting with a fear that was drowning my heart. But then, just as the nurse was about to inject the anesthesia, a crash made the whole room tremble. The door burst open. The screech of the hinges ripped the air. All the doctors and nurses were startled. Some turned around abruptly with panic in their eyes. Mario came in like a small whirlwind. His sneakers were still stained with mud. His school uniform was wrinkled, and his little chest was heaving as he gasped. He was tightly holding his old cell phone with the broken screen as if it were the most valuable thing in the world. A nurse ran after him, shouting desperately, "Child, you can't come in here! My God, stop!" But Mario didn't stop. He ran straight toward me, his big round eyes filled with fear, but burning with a determination I had never seen in a child. "Grandma," he said in a trembling voice, but so clear it froze everyone in the room. "I have to tell everyone why my dad really needs your kidney." His words were like a bomb that exploded in my head. I held my breath. My heart seemed to stop. The operating room fell into an absolute silence, broken only by the beep-beep of the heart monitor, which now sounded louder, as if it wanted to shatter the stillness. A nearby doctor dropped a pair of surgical forceps. The metallic sound against the marble floor was deafening, a sharp cut in the tense air. Dr. Evans, the head surgeon, raised a hand, signaling for the entire team to stop. He frowned, but his voice was calm and firm. "Let the boy speak. Whatever you have to say it now." I looked at Mario. I saw his little hand gripping the cell phone, his face pale, but his eyes bright, as if he were carrying the weight of the world on his shoulders. "Get out!" Through the glass, Rebecca banged on the door furiously, making the glass resound. "Don't listen to him!" she shouted in a shrill, almost hysterical voice. "He's just a kid, you'll see!" But Rebecca's gaze was no longer icy cold. It was trembling with panic, as if the secret she had tried so hard to hide was about to come to light. Mario didn't look at his mom. He came up to me, and with trembling hands, he pressed play on the cell phone. A recording played. It was Rebecca's voice, whispered but clear as a knife plunging into my heart. "After the transplant, the test results will be perfect. Don't worry, that old woman won't dare refuse." The entire room seemed to explode in silence. I felt my blood turn to ice, the air get stuck in my throat. Dr. Evans turned abruptly to look at me, his eyes wide with amazement. "Stop!" he ordered in a voice as sharp as a scalpel. "Stop all preparations right now." A nurse quickly withdrew the syringe. The others stood motionless, not daring to move. Rebecca, on the other side of the glass, let out a scream and hit the door. "It's not true! She made it all up! This child is being manipulated!" But her voice broke, as if even she didn't believe her own words. I looked at Mario and saw him burst into tears, but he was still clinging to the cell phone as if it were the last piece of evidence to save me. "I have a video too," he said, his voice choked. "It's when my mom and grandparents are talking about selling medicines." He played a video, and the image appeared on the small screen. Rebecca and Mrs. Peterson in the parking lot, exchanging an envelope with the unknown man I had seen before. Mrs. Peterson's voice was heard. "After this operation, we'll have enough data to sell the medicine abroad. This money will change everything." I lay there, my vision blurred by tears, feeling a mix of horror and relief. Horror for the truth I had tried so hard to avoid, now exposed before everyone, and relief because I finally no longer had to lie to myself. Brandon burst in from the hallway, his face red with anger. "Enough!" he shouted, throwing himself against the glass door to face Rebecca. "You poisoned him! You thought we were all blind?" Before anyone could react, Brandon raised his hand and slapped Rebecca. The dry sound echoed down the hallway, making Mrs. Peterson scream. "How dare you hit my daughter!" But Brandon didn't stop. He pointed at Rebecca, his voice trembling with rage. "What medicines have you been giving him? What did you do to my brother Adam?" Rebecca put a hand to her cheek. Tears were streaming down her face, but in her eyes I saw no regret, only the panic of someone who has been discovered. "You're crazy!" she yelled, turning to Dr. Evans. "Don't listen to them! They're slandering me!" But Dr. Evans didn't answer. He turned pale and addressed a nurse. "This is no longer a surgery. It's a crime scene. Call the police now." A nurse ran out, while the others stood there, looking at each other in confusion. I lay there, feeling the world crumble. Tears were rolling down my cheeks, but I didn't wipe them away. I looked at Mario, my little grandson, who had bravely burst into the operating room to save me. I looked at Brandon, my younger son, who had tried to protect me at all costs. And I thought of Adam, my son, who lay in the room next door, not knowing that the wife he trusted had betrayed him. I stayed there, letting the tears flow, letting the truth seep into every fiber of my being. In that moment, I understood that everything had changed. The truth had burst out like a door being knocked down, and nothing could hide it now. The operating room, which had been cold and silent before, had become a chaotic battlefield. The confused nurses looked at each other, not knowing what to do. Dr. Evans frowned. His sharp gaze scanned each person as if he were trying to maintain order in the middle of the storm. I lay there, my vision blurred by tears, but unable to take my eyes off the scene. The truth Mario had just revealed was like a fire, burning away all the trust I had left. Rebecca, after Brandon's slap, clutched her cheek and yelled in a shrill voice, "How dare you hit me? I do everything for my husband!" Tears were running down her face, but I could clearly see the panic in her eyes. It wasn't the pain of a wife unjustly accused, but the fear of someone who has been discovered. She turned to her parents, grabbing Mrs. Peterson's blouse, her voice choked. "I didn't do anything wrong. I just wanted to save Adam. Dad, Mom, say something." But Mr. Collins and Mrs. Peterson just stood there, their faces pale, unable to say a word. Mrs. Peterson, usually so cunning and bossy, was now just clenching her hands, biting her lips to hold back a tremor. Suddenly, Mrs. Peterson hit the floor with her cane. The dry sound of the wood against the tile echoed, and she pointed directly at me. "You dared to manipulate your grandson into making up lies about me, you evil old woman!" Her words were like a stab to my heart. I wanted to scream, to tell her that I hadn't manipulated anyone, that it was her daughter who had betrayed my family. But I had a lump in my throat and couldn't speak. I just stood there, looking at her, feeling cornered in a dark place where all my years of sacrifice were being trampled. Mr. Collins, Rebecca's father, whispered discreetly to a doctor he knew who was nearby, in a low but hurried voice, "Please, continue with the surgery. We'll take care of everything. We just need this to be over." He slipped an envelope into the doctor's hand, but Dr. Evans came over immediately with a voice as cold as ice. "The law decides here, not money." He snatched the envelope, threw it on the floor, and ordered a nurse, "Close the doors. No one leaves. I'm going to inform the hospital management right now." The sound of his footsteps was firm, like a declaration that everything had gotten out of control. Brandon, from the hallway, burst into the operating room, ignoring a nurse's attempts to stop him. He grabbed me by the shoulders, his eyes red, and shouted, "Mom, don't donate the kidney. It's all their plan. She poisoned my brother. Don't you see, Adam?" Brandon's voice trembled, full of rage and pain. I looked into his eyes and saw the desperation of a son trying to protect his mother. I wanted to say something, to comfort him, but I couldn't. I just stood there, feeling the world crumble beneath my feet. From the preparation room next door, Adam's weak and confused voice was heard. "What's going on? Why are they arguing?" He tried to sit up, breathing with difficulty. The IVs in his arm trembled with the movement. I heard my son's voice, and my heart broke into 1,000 pieces. Adam knew nothing. He didn't know that the wife he loved, the one he trusted, had dragged the whole family into a dark conspiracy. I wanted to run to him, hug him, and tell him everything would be all right, but I couldn't move. I only lay there with tears streaming, feeling torn between my love for Adam and the horrible truth that had just come to light. Mario, standing beside me, broke into a fit of sobbing, but he still lifted the cell phone and said in a choked voice, "I have another video. This is when my mom gives the medicines to my grandparents." He played the video, and the image appeared on the small screen. Rebecca and Mrs. Peterson in the parking lot making the exchange with the unknown man. Mrs. Peterson's voice was heard, clear and cold. "If the transplant is a success, we can sell the medicine abroad. With that money, we can launder all the dirty profits." The entire room fell silent. A nurse covered her mouth, her eyes wide with horror. Dr. Evans was frozen, gripping the file as if to contain his rage. Rebecca, in a panic, lunged to snatch the cell phone from Mario, trying to throw it to the floor. "No, that's fake!" she yelled, her voice broken. But Brandon was faster. He grabbed the phone from her and pushed Rebecca, who fell to the floor. One of her high heels flew off, bouncing on the floor with a dry sound, like the final period on the farce she had orchestrated. "Shut your mouth!" Brandon yelled, his face red with fury. "You think you can fool everyone? What did you do to my brother Adam?" Rebecca was sitting on the floor, her hair a mess, but her gaze still had a flash of stubbornness. "I didn't do anything. You're slandering me." Hospital security appeared. 2 men in uniform entered with serious expressions. They approached Rebecca, Mr. Collins, and Mrs. Peterson, not giving them time to react. Mrs. Peterson was still cursing with the cane trembling in her hand. "Traitor! You destroyed this family!" She pointed at me, but her voice broke as if even she knew everything was over. Rebecca was held firmly. She writhed. "Let me go. I didn't do anything wrong." But her gaze now only reflected the desperation of someone cornered. I lay there, motionless, my body cold, but my eyes wide open, watching the truth unfold before me. When the operating room door closed behind the police, the screams of Rebecca and her parents still echoed in the hospital hallway. But for me, they faded into the air like a nightmare that dissipates. Rebecca kept screaming in a broken voice, "I was contributing to science! Nobody understands me!" But no one answered her. Mr. Collins and Mrs. Peterson, who once sat with such arrogance in my living room, now walked with their heads bowed, escorted in silence. I lay on the operating table, still trembling, but it was no longer from fear. A strange feeling of relief flooded me, as if I had been freed from a cage I didn't know I was in. Dr. Evans came over. His face was serious, but his gaze had softened. "Mrs. Jones," he said in a grave voice, "we have canceled the surgery. We will transfer Adam to an alternative treatment, dialysis combined with new medications. You risked your health preparing for this, but you have saved his life and your dignity." I looked at him. Tears were rolling down my cheeks, but I didn't wipe them away. "Thank you, doctor," I whispered, in a weak but sincere voice. I didn't know if I had really saved my dignity, but I knew that for the first time in months, I felt like I was breathing, truly breathing. Brandon ran to me and helped me sit up. He took my hand tightly. His gaze was firm but full of pain. "You still have me, Mom," he said in a choked voice. "I'm going to protect you. From now on, I promise." I squeezed his hand, feeling the warmth of his rough, grease-stained skin. I looked into Brandon's eyes and saw the strength of a son willing to carry the whole world to protect his mother. "You're my pride, son," I whispered, and the tears fell again. Brandon didn't say anything. He just hugged me tightly. And in that hug, I found some comfort in the middle of the ruins of my family. Adam was transferred to a recovery room. When I entered, he was lying down, his face pale and the IVs still in his arms. He looked at me with red eyes and asked in a weak voice, "Mom, is it true that everything my wife did was to harm me?" His question was like a stab to my heart. I went over, sat on the bed beside him, and hugged him. My tears fell, wetting his hospital gown. "Oh, Adam, my son," I said in a choked voice. "I don't know where all this started, but I promise I won't let anyone hurt you anymore." Adam lowered his head. Tears rolled down his skinny cheeks. "Mom, I was wrong," he whispered. "I didn't protect you, and I let you suffer too much." I hugged him tighter, feeling that in the world it was just the two of us, clinging to each other in the middle of the storm that had just passed. In the following days, the newspapers started covering the news. "Drug trafficking ring busted at local hospital," the headlines screamed. They wrote about a group of doctors and pharmacists involved, in which Rebecca, Mr. Collins, and Mrs. Peterson were key players. They had been testing illegal drugs on patients like Adam, using the kidney transplant as a smokescreen to collect data for an international organization. Reading those words filled me with horror and pain. I thought of Rebecca, of the times she served me food, of her sweet words that I now knew were false. I thought of Adam, of the months he suffered without knowing that his own wife was putting him in danger. Adam began his dialysis and medication treatment. His health improved slowly, but steadily. One afternoon he took my hand, lowered his head, and said in a choked voice, "Mom, I was blind. I trusted Rebecca and almost let you lose everything." I stroked his head like I used to when he was a child and told him, "Son, what's important is that you're still here. That's all I need." But in my heart, a scar had formed, not just from Rebecca's betrayal, but because I had let myself be led to the brink between life and death without asking questions. I went back to my little house where Joe was still motionless in his wheelchair. I sat beside him and told him everything, from Mario's recording to the scene of Rebecca being handcuffed. I don't know if he understood everything, but when I finished talking, I saw him blink and 2 tears rolled down his gaunt cheeks. I took his hand, squeezed it, and for the first time in years, I felt a small response from him, a weak squeeze, as if he were trying to tell me he understood. I burst into tears, not from pain, but because I knew that despite everything, I still had him. I still had my family. Mario became the little hero of the neighborhood. The day he came home, he ran to me, hugged me around the neck, and whispered, "Grandma, I'm sorry I took so long to speak up, but at least I got there in time to save you." I laughed through my tears, hugging the boy, feeling the warmth of his small body. "You're the bravest person I know," I said, ruffling his hair. Mario smiled, the first smile I had seen from him in days. I looked into his eyes and saw that his innocence was still there, although it was stained by what he had had to witness. I promised myself I would protect Mario, give him a childhood that no one could steal from him. The last night, I sat in my small room under the flickering light of the oil lamp. I opened my old diary and wrote the last lines. Blood doesn't always make you family. Sometimes it's the truth that shows you who really deserves to be called that. I lost a lot, but I found myself. I closed the diary, put down the pen, and listened to the rain hitting the backyard roof. I felt a strange calm, as if the storm had passed, leaving a clear sky. I looked out the window. I saw the pale moonlight illuminating the backyard, and I knew that even if the road ahead was long, I would never again let myself be blinded. I had regained my own strength, and that was the most valuable thing no one could take from me. The story you've just heard has been changed in names and places to protect the identity of the people involved. We are not telling this to judge, but with the hope that someone listens and stops to reflect. How many mothers are suffering in silence inside their own homes? I truly wonder, if you were in my place, what would you do? Would you choose to be silent to keep the peace? Or would you dare to face everything to reclaim your voice? I want to know your opinion because every story is like a candle that can light the way for someone else. God always blesses, and I am convinced that courage leads us to better days. Meanwhile, on the final screen, I leave you with 2 of the channel's most beloved stories. I'm sure they will surprise you. Thanks for staying with me until this moment.